center front, right? So do that before you do anything else, and then we have to start thinking about what else. So we need to remember that this piece already has seam allowance on the side seam and the waist. Okay, we have to be mindful of those things. So if we want this to finish at 22 inches, where do I measure down from? We want this
half an inch below the...
Half of an inch below the cut edge up here. So my center front waist, is actually here.
Because we're creating these pattern pieces on a dot paper with no seam allowances, right?
We can leave the seam allowance. Why cut it off when we have to add it on again, right? We are putting on brown paper. It just will be flush. Okay?
It will be what?
Okay,
Just
they
measure
said,
from
well, aren't we creating
Yes.
a dot paper without seam allowance? Well, it already has it,
Yeah.
so why get rid of it?
And
right?
you said
we'll be putting it on brown paper
without.
Then
with
you
the
just don't
seam,
add
just
a
cut
half
on the
inch.
edge.
So
You
you
don't
the brown.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we don't add
Because
more.
already has.
So you won't see the brown paper.
You won't see the brown. You might in the parts that we're adding or taking away. Absolutely. But we won't see any brown paper up here. And do you notice how I just roughly cut it out? Because why cut it out twice? If I can just staple this on brown paper now, cut that edge out once. Okay? So I need to measure my 22 inches, and I'm measuring it from a half of an inch below that new center front corner. Okay, because I already have half inch seam allowance here. That's my new center front line. So from there, I'll measure down 22 inches. So 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. It's actually pretty close because we had made it shorter, right? I'm getting like, I don't know, a hair bigger than a half of an inch longer. So this could conceivably be the correct length if I were hemming it. Okay, I've got like, it's probably supposed to be a half of an inch. I think all my pencil tracings have grown things a little bit. So it's, I've got more like 9/16 here, right? But let's go back and look at our dress again. Okay, is there any sort of turn back hem? What do we see?
Oh, no, just a merit. What is that? A merit? Merit.
Overlock, just plain old overlock.
Oh.
This is just 3-thread overlock. I have no idea.
Don't touch it.
I really have no idea.
Interesting. So that's what we're going to do, huh?
Glue down to the.
I don't know. It's sticky. I have 3
Yeah,
children.
don't touch
It's sticky. You're funny. My son would not be interested in this. My daughter's just gooey with chocolate lately, and I think she thought this was pretty. Anyway, so 3-thread overlock. Okay, so if I have 3-thread overlock as my hem, and that's actually an acceptable hem for a lining. If I have 3-thread overlock, where should I mark my cut edge? At 22. Just at 22. I could add an 1/8 if I wanted to or whatever. And I know I got an extra little 16th in here, so I think what I'm just going to do is lop off a half of an inch. So it's like reverse seam allowance here. I'm going to mark my new cutoff line. Now, do I need to do anything special on the back?
Yeah, you have to add a seam.
I have to add a seam.
It's got a center back.
Yeah, so let's look at the back.
The back was on the floor.
Okay, let's look at the back. There is a center back seam. Our last dress did not have one, okay? So this back will not be on the fold. We're going to be adding seam allowance here. Now this is an invisible zipper, so we only really need a half of an inch. And I'm going to tell you, let's just do a half of an inch because there's a whole lot of stuff going in there, and if all of it had an inch, there would just be way too much stuff. So we're going to be doing a half of an inch seam allowance in the center back. How do I figure out the length?
Match it up to the front.
Match it up to the front one. So if I'm cutting off a half of an inch on my front one, I'm going to cut off the same amount in the back. Okay, I don't need to measure down 22 inches from anywhere. Okay, so I've got my front one marked where I need to cut it out. I'm going to label that this is really center front, not that weird cut edge. Okay, so this guy, I'm now going to staple to brown paper. I'm going to double my brown paper. I'm going to put it on the fold. I'm going to cut this front edge, line that up with the fold of my brown paper, and then I'm just going to cut out along my marked edges. I'm going to notch here. I'm going to notch at my, ignore the princess notch. Ignore that for now. We're going to do a different kind of notch up there on the front one. So just leave the side seam notches. Okay, we're ignoring this one because we're going to put a different kind of thing because our peplum doesn't go to there. So rather than having a princess notch and a peplum notch near it, let's just have one.
So
okay?
we eradicate that, princess?
We're not going to put a notch here. We're not going to put a notch here.
Right, do we rub it out on our thing?
You can, just don't notch it. Okay, just don't notch it. So you can erase it or not. Just don't notch that, all right? So I'm going to now cut this out of brown paper. I'm going to cut this out of brown paper, and then I can add 1/2-inch seam allowance down the center back. So you can have your little brown part showing there if you'd like to.
So
Okay?
if we cut it already and it's too short, can we add it on the brown or?
Absolutely. Yep, so the brown paper will make it the right size. So if you've cut too much off, add it back on, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut these out of brown paper. Then you're going to take that brown paper one and trace it onto dot paper again. Okay, so just we got a little bit of busy work, both front and back, trace them onto. Once they're the correct length, you've added back in the stuff we need to add. We're going to trace those off again, okay?
Okay.
So easy stuff.